He is the former Radiant Great Knight Joseph, and also the holder of the demonic sword in this generation. As the holder of the demonic sword, he was once a figure as dazzling as the sun. But after the battle with Daniel, he lost his right arm. Although his supporters continued to stand by him, as always, the once unbeatable holy flame now had an unforgettable flaw. Since then, he has been disheartened and eventually chose to retire. He went to the intelligence agency and became the head of retirement affairs. He began to become depressed and irritable. He did not dress up. Gradually, some people started gossiping behind his back. They say he is the longest living demonic sword holder. But that's because he chose to fall willingly before being tainted by the demonic sword. He used to be extremely angered by these remarks. But now when he thinks about it, perhaps his laissez-faire attitude at the time was fortunate. Even more fortunate now is that he may have found the true heir of the demonic sword. When the bookstore owner said they would hand it over to me, Joseph must admit that he is crushing. However, he still somewhat hesitantly asked, "Are you sure? Will this bring any trouble? Dealing with it is not an easy thing." Leland listened to him and thought, "Truly worthy of being Danny's friend. This uncle is indeed a kind person like Danny." So he smiled and replied, "What trouble could there be? You must be struggling in your current state. If you need it, I can give you this book. Consider it a gift. All along, you have carried too much burden. Even heroes like you need to take a break." After receiving a response like Leland's, Joseph couldn't help but sigh. What selfless and noble qualities these are. Indeed, only the immortal race. Only they can pursue such goodness that transcends common sense. However, he still chose to refuse and said, "Rest for now. Let's talk about it again when the world is at peace." "I need to think about it again. Can you lend me this book for a few days?" "No problem at all. Just register some basic information. You need to pay a deposit once. In the future, borrowing books only requires writing your name and the date. If you no longer wish to borrow, half of the deposit will be refunded." Joseph was stunned when he heard this. He really is opening a bookstore. But then he had second thoughts. This is the proper disguise. So he nodded, signed his name. Then he picked up the book Spawn of the Abyss and performed a formal knight salute towards Leland. He walked out of the bookstore and on the other side, Claude. He did hear the news of teacher Joseph being taken down. He was suddenly shocked. He hurriedly prepared to gather manpower to support. But just then, his phone suddenly rang. It was actually a call from his teacher Joseph. So he asked teacher what instructions he had. Joseph directly expressed, "Immediately withdraw the reconnaissance personnel from street number 23. I want to classify this bookstore as level 1 confidential in Chinese area." He heard what teacher Joseph said. Claude was stunned directly. You know, in Arcane Tower, API corresponds to anomalous panic devastate immortal. And this eye level is actually immortal level. Claude asked in a low voice in disbelief. "Teacher, what exactly happened? The owner of that bookstore is there anyone else with you?" "Yes." Claude heard teacher say that and suddenly realized. He looked at Greg, who had already been strangled by him. He quickly delivered another chop to the neck and said, "Sorry, teacher, it was my negligence." He knew he had been negligent. "Why don't you shut up and get back to work quickly? Do you want me to send you to the Northern Highlands to plant potatoes?" Claude hurriedly shook his head indicating that he didn't want to. He then notified the personnel in charge of investigating street number 23. Immediate withdrawal? Then he contacted the personnel in charge of the intelligence agency files. Establish a file. Just wait for Joseph to come back and fill in the content. When he finished reporting, Joseph also entered at this time. He said to him, "Very good. You did well. Who was the person next to you just now?" "Use forgotten brand." Claude picked up Black Cat and said, "This is our investigator. His name is Greg, from the prestigious wizard family on Polymorph with exceptional talent. He has one special trait: he is your fan. He has attended 13 undefeated Holy Flame fan support events, spending around $3 million on various support activities per year, including the event last year where Joseph's name was marked in gold. He should be considered a core fan. Joseph heard him say that and commented, "The Wizard family seems really wealthy." However, instead of spending money on meaningless things, it's better to just contribute directly to the idol. So he decided to transfer him over under the guise of recruiting him as a Night Disciple trainee. It could be considered as the cost of a close observation and contact. Surely, he would be happy to do so. Claude couldn't help but complain inwardly after hearing this. How could there be such a greedy and inferior Radiant Knight? He actually cheated even a child's money. But on the surface, he still answered with a straight face. "Okay, I'll arrange it right away." This way, even memory erasure is saved, Joseph said. While looking at the file content, he entered. Zone I-13. Street number 23, Nokim Upper City. Bookstore number 412. Danger level: kind, not recommended for contact. Confidentiality level: top secret, currently under surveillance. The bookstore owner suspected to be of the immortal race, running this bookstore in seclusion. Their business includes lending and selling books. The books contain mysterious and powerful forces. After he clicks the confirmation button, Joseph thought, this top-secret file should be able to warn those who see him to stay away from that bookstore. Of course, if someone still chooses to go to their death after reading this file, then he can only wish that idiot good luck. Can you imagine a tough guy with an iron will? He is wearing pink pajamas. Is he hiding in the room sneakily watching the fairy tale story? Yes, at this moment, Joseph is indeed doing so. He is flipping through the fairy tale storybook. He clearly feels the emotions of the demonic sword. It is peaceful and pleasant. At this moment, the sound of the landline suddenly comes from the living room. Joseph angrily cursed twice. Then he walked towards the door and said, "Melissa remembers to drink milk." As soon as he finished speaking, a girl with red hair poked her head out from the next room and replied discontentedly, "Got it, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm already the team leader of the anomalous level combat department. You don't have to keep reminding me all the time," Joseph said playfully. "Is that so, my dear child? I didn't give you milk to help you grow taller. You're almost unmarriable." Upon hearing Joseph's words, Melissa instinctively covered her chest and put on a look of being wronged. At this moment, she noticed there was a book on the table, feeling a bit puzzled. How could this old man, whose mind was full of muscles, be reading a book? Driven by curiosity, she opened this. Spawn of the Abyss. As her fingers flipped faster and faster, she gradually immersed herself in the story of the book. Her gaze also began to change. Her expression became serious. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The sound of Joseph hammering the wall woke her up. She quickly placed the book back in its original position. Then, she casually pretended to be walking back to her bedroom. At this moment, Joseph stopped her. Melissa thought he had discovered something. She was about to explain. But to her surprise, Joseph just wanted to remind her to drink milk. Melissa could only smile awkwardly and nod in response. Then she slammed the door shut with a bang. Joseph looked at her like this. He thought this girl was going through a rebellious period recently. He was thinking of disciplining her. But he looked at the photos on the counter and thought better of it. As long as she can grow up healthy and well, it's all that matters. After returning to her room, Melissa let out a sigh of relief. A series of questions popped into her mind. Who actually wrote that book? Is the main character in it really the same elf King Candela followed by demonic sword Candela? Why are these stories so captivating and realistic? But the most crucial part is that she hasn't finished reading it yet. And she happens to be stuck at a particularly thrilling point. Melissa threw herself onto the bed like a tantrum, rolling around. She was itching with impatience. However, what puzzled her was that someone as stubborn as her father would also read this kind of book. It seemed that she had been biased before. From the few words during her father's phone call just now, she probably understood the origin of this book. It came from a bookstore with a particularly high level of confidentiality. But what does it matter anyway? Just a bookstore. Those powerful, stubborn old men wouldn't stay in a place like a bookstore. So, without further ado, she reached out and concentrated ether. Ether formed into a key. Database key, access level 1. The next second, a massive database appeared before her eyes. Indeed, she was right. Using her late mother's account permissions was sufficient. After all, she was one of the Radiant Knights. Melissa clasped her hands together and said, "Thank you, Mom. After I finish reading this novel, I will work hard to become an excellent knight and not disappoint your expectations." Found it. Bookstore, confidentiality level top secret, level 1, archivist, Joseph, danger level, kind. Melissa looked at the kind danger level, thinking that it wasn't very serious. In that case, it should be fine for her to take a look. Just then, she caught sight of the milk on the table. She snorted. She reached out and drank the cup in one gulp. Then she gestured towards her little white rabbit with both hands. She muttered, "Will you grow up big? Isn't this Danny? How come you arrived so quickly this time? The weather is so bad today, you made a special trip. Do you have something urgent to discuss?" Danny first took off his hat. He slightly bowed and gave a salute to Leland. "It's a weather issue. It's not important compared to your kindness towards me. This time, I will formally express my gratitude to you." Leland looked at the gargoyle on the table and smiled. "I was already very satisfied with your gift last time. If you want to give something valuable this time, I will have to think it over carefully before accepting it." Danny heard Leland say this and thought, "Leland is trying to comfort me again. The mere gargoyle is far from comparable to the gift I have prepared this time. However, Leland still behaves so humbly, taking care of my feelings. Now, because of his gift, I am just one step away from truly breaking through to the immortal level. So, only this gift that I have spent 2 years preparing can compare to the blessings I have received over the past 2 years." So Danny insisted, "You don't have to hesitate. It actually doesn't have much practical value for me. But perhaps it has greater significance for you. If you don't accept it, I feel uneasy about it." Leland heard Danny say that. Saying that I feel uneasy about it is a bit too serious. I just did some simple tasks. However, after talking for so long, I still don't know what you have prepared. Let me take a look first. Danny took a deep breath and said to Leland, "This is a gift that I spent 2 years preparing. I hope you will like it." Then he took out a decoration that looked like wind chimes. Leland found out it was a dream catcher. He thought that the gift prepared by Danny was unexpectedly this. It really brings back memories. A few years before coming from another world, he once participated in a folk customs cultural exhibition. There, he learned some things. Information about Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher is a cultural symbol of Native American culture. Native Americans believe that the night air is filled with dreams, and only dream catchers can filter out nightmares and capture good dreams. After communicating with the old man, he learned more about the legends of Dreamcatcher. For example, they believe that the pearls on the Dreamcatcher represent the power and wisdom that people are captured during sleep, enhancing communication between people and the spirit world. He really didn't expect to see the Dreamcatcher again here. Danny's recognition of Leland as Dreamcatcher was admired in the usual way. However, he was not surprised that Leland knew about it. Because Dreamcatcher is not uncommon as a magical prop. Its greatest value has never been in itself. Its greatest value lies in the dream caught within the web. Leland looked at this Dreamcatcher in terms of its intricacy and overall quality. It's clearly hand-woven. And recently, because of the heavy rain outside, his sleep quality hasn't been very good. Danny's blessing is indeed thoughtful. Leland smiled at the scene and said, "This is exactly what I need. Thank you, Danny." Upon receiving such a response, Danny showed an excited expression. he replied with a sense of relief. "It is my honor to be needed by you." Later, he waved goodbye to Leland. But in his heart, he was thinking. Within this web, he captured an unparalleled dream, tinged with terrifying danger. Without the spiritual power of the immortal level, one soul would be instantly crushed by the dream. However, for high-level beings like Leland, it must be a rare enjoyment and pleasure. Wish you sweet dreams. Leland hangs the dream catcher on the wall. Then he turns off the light. He closed his eyes. The darkness rushed in like a tide. But when he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a vast white world. He was in a dream. The falling snow was as gray as ash but not cold. On the contrary, it was somewhat warm. Leland felt a bit magical, but after all, it was just a dream. Nothing seemed surprising to him anymore. He looked up and ahead. Giant green trees covered the sky, twisting their gnarled branches. It seemed as if blood vessels were entwined on top of bones. This is a giant tree that is absolutely impossible to exist in reality. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. A silver-haired woman appeared under the tree. The woman had a beautiful face and delicate features that left him mesmerized instantly. In that moment, a melody unknown to Leland suddenly surfaced in his mind. He crowned himself as king in the frigid northern lands. That is truly an unparalleled scenery. The hills covered with irises look like ashes of fallen snow. Giant ancient trees and sleeping beauties. This is indeed a beautiful dreamlike scene, like a fairy tale. Danny did not deceive me. At this moment, Leland crouched down and smelled one of the irises. It emitted a simple, clean, and refreshing fragrance that was pleasing to the heart and soul. He looked at the flower in his hand. No matter from which angle, it was unrealistically real. He thought to himself that it seemed to be a so-called lucid dream. In this state, dreamers can have the cognitive abilities and memories of being awake in their dreams, even making their feelings and reality indistinguishable. In the current situation, the dream catcher seems to have some psychological implications, coupled with Danny's verbal inducement, ultimately leading to this dream. That's a very scientific explanation, reasonable yet romantic. However, speaking of which, since it's his dream, he can do whatever he wants. But such thoughts can only be wishful thinking. It's better not to put it into practice. After all, even in dreams, he still has some bottom line. But there's no harm in just taking a look. Looking at the woman lying under the tree, he is quite curious. Why did he happen to dream about such a beauty? Normally, the characters in dreams are not so clear and should be completely unfamiliar. However, if one must insist, the popular white hair attribute makes her seem very familiar. But in the end, all of this is just a dream. That means anything is possible. So Leland slowly walked towards the tree. He wanted to take a closer look. What exactly was his dream girl like? Leland walked to the tree and observed it closely. He only then realized that this woman was even more perfect than he had imagined. He couldn't help but admire in his heart. Truly worthy of being in a dream. Such beauty was like a perfect artwork. Just like the Venus de Milo. Full of a divine and unreal sense of beauty. However, since it was in a dream, let him be a little unrestrained for now. Leland bends down. Placing the white iris flower he had picked gently above the woman's left ear, he lifts a strand of silver hair. This somewhat intrusive and ambiguous gesture made him feel somewhat excited. Blushing, he closed his eyes. But surprisingly, it was just a dream. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to play along a little. After all, she had not woken up yet. However, when he opened his eyes again, the woman's eyes unexpectedly opened as well. Then she looked at him blankly. Seeing the woman awake, Leland was also taken aback. He suddenly took a few steps back. At this point, the woman had already stood up as well. But as he stood up, Leland realized that he actually had to raise his head to look at her. She didn't notice when she was lying down. This dream girl of his must be at least 2 meters tall. Truly amazing that it's in a dream. Anything is possible. At this moment, This condescending dream girl took the lead and asked him a question. "Who are you?" Leland was a little stunned when he heard her question. This was actually what he wanted to ask. He didn't expect to be asked first now. But he also found it very interesting. After all, the characters in dreams are often manifestations of one's subconscious. Conversing with the subconscious. This was indeed a rare experience. So Leland replied with a smile. "I am a person who is dreaming, right?" This man is a bit of a rascal. In the dream, the white-haired girl asked him who he was. He said he was a dreamer. But when it was his turn to ask the girl, he directly instructed her not to say she was a dreamer. "Ariel is my name," the girl replied with a smile. "So now it's my turn to ask questions, right?" Leland listened to her and was surprised that she would retaliate in such a way. And the power of that smile's attack is also too strong. It even made him involuntarily touch his nose. At this moment, Ariel closed her eyes. Looking forlorn, she said, "I have been here for a very long time. So long that I have forgotten what time is. This place is clearly beautiful, yet I often feel that it is too quiet. It's like an eternal, silent stillness. Can you tell me why I feel this way?" Leland listened to her and thought to himself, "Isn't this just loneliness? Could it be that he can expand his business even in his dreams?" This dream seems too appealing to oneself. On the romantic, fairy tale-like Iris Flower Hill, he helps a charming and elegant girl out of trouble. It's truly an irresistible everyday relaxation hobby. As the saying goes, helping others brings happiness to oneself. The ancients did not deceive me. However, if we were to talk about serious matters, his pajamas are a bit sloppy. It would be better if he could change into his usual suit. Just as this thought came to mind, the next second, the pajamas on his body actually turned into his usual suit. Sure enough, it's really worthy of being in a dream. It can indeed to some extent turn imagination into reality. But since it's in a dream, he doesn't need to be so restrained. So Leland reached out his hand. Showing a commercial smile, he said, "If you don't mind, would you like to sit down and have a chat?" Ariel looked somewhat puzzled at Leland's hand. She hesitated for a moment. Eventually, she gently lifted her own hand and placed it in Leland's palm. Leland felt the cold and fragile boneless touch and couldn't help but blush. Then he held the other person's hand and sat in the garden, asking, "Have you always been alone in this dream? No one has ever come in here, and no one can come in. You are the first to enter." Upon hearing this response, Leland thought, "Looks like this is a setting for a character like Lettuce Girl. She has long lived in a beautiful garden, always alone. Forever sleeping is her life. Truly very fairy tale." Unfortunately, in the end, it was just a dream. Even if he understood the crux of the matter, he could not actually help her. However, Leland still said seriously, "What made you feel this way is loneliness and solitude. Because you have always been alone, not being understood. So lonely. Your life lacks freshness. You are left with only contemplation. That's why you feel lonely. The more you think, the more painful it becomes. Many people are like this." Listening to Leland say this, Ariel also spoke thoughtfully. "Thoughts are the root of suffering. And they cannot understand me, so they fear me. They keep their distance from me." Leland listened to her talking about feeling lonely because of thoughts. He thought to himself that her persona also included being a philosopher. In that case, he will start from here. So Leland smiled and said, "I once heard a saying like this. Humans think. Divine will laugh." Let's not dwell on the original meaning of this sentence for now. However, I imagine that if Divine sees you contemplating a woman so outstandingly unique, his smile would surely be very warm. Give a knowing smile. Having such thoughts, perhaps contemplation is no longer painful. This is just a small unspoken understanding between you and the divine. Don't you think that's very romantic? That kind of thinking really sounds like something a romantic would say. As you can see, I am, through and through, an incurable romantic. Leland rubbed his head and replied apologetically. But perhaps it is precisely because of this that I am able to converse with you here. I think I may understand you. I know that since you appeared in this dream, it means you have understood me and are on the same level as me. Maybe your thoughts stand even higher. Leland heard her say that. He thought, is this the philosopher's way of complimenting people? It sounds strangely soothing. In that case, I must have been acknowledged. So the next second, Leland directly held Ariel's hand and said, so I have an unpleasant request. No, this is my most sincere hope. I hope you can agree. Ariel was also taken aback by his sudden move. Please go ahead and speak. Can you be my friend? Leland asked with great gentleness. Although it is beautiful here, if you always face the same scenery, you will eventually get tired of it. Have you ever tried making a friend? Sharing some daily trivial matters together. Perhaps it will bring much more joy than being alone. He mentioned sharing and thought of recommending books. The conversation has come to this point. At this point, he couldn't help but promote 2 books. It's simply irresistible. Although it's not in a bookstore. But like before, with reference memory, it should be possible for him to recreate a book. The next second, as he expected, with a sharp sound, a copy of Grimm's fairy tales fell onto his lap. Leland looked at the contents of the book. After confirming that everything was correct, he handed it to Ariel. He said, consider this book as a gift for our meeting. Ariel accepted it with both hands. She gently stroked the book and said, it's been a long time since someone gave me a gift, and no one is willing to chat with me. I have nothing. But here is this tree and its fruits, these flowers, and the honey in the flowers. You are welcome to take one of them if you wish, as my gift in return. Leland listened to her saying so. He raised his head only to realize he hadn't paid much attention before. The tree turned out to bear golden fruit. Thank you, words. This tree seems to be of no use to him. But it is not completely useless. There is nothing special about the flowers either. A rare experience. I still want something rare. So Leland thought for a moment. He looked at the golden fruit on the tree and asked, can this fruit be eaten directly? Ariel smiled and said, of course you can. As soon as her voice fell, a golden apple dropped with a crisp sound. Leland reached out and caught it just right. It truly resembled something out of a dream, as if it was delicately drawn. Just don't know how it tastes. Leland couldn't wait and took a bite. The taste is sour and sweet. There isn't even a core. He feels there is no difference from a normal apple. It seems to have referenced the taste from reality. Just finished the apple, Leland suddenly felt a little fuzzy in his consciousness. Does that mean he is going to wake up so soon? Then it's time to say goodbye. Although he feels a little reluctant. The next second after he finishes this sentence, the dream begins to shatter gradually. His body is also slowly being sucked in. At this moment, Ariel suddenly pounced on him. Then she softly bit his earlobe and said, I hope when the next night comes, we will still meet here.